Welcome to another edition of the Watchful Citizen, a local cable access program brought to you by the Lancaster County Democratic Party. I'm your host, Benny Shobe, and we have in studio today Karen Amon from the Lower Platte South National Resource District, Subdistrict 10. That's a mouthful and I get it wrong most of the time. Karen, thanks for joining us today.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm happy to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is the state's NRDs, and specifically Lower Platte South. But first, I have to tell you, I love the name of this program because the state capital is so significant for Nebraskans.
Yes.
And I think it's right there over the north stairs that it says, help me, the salvation of the state.
Yes, resides in the watchfulness of their citizenry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we take our title of our show seriously because we think that an informed electorate, a informed citizenry makes for a better community, makes for a better state.
Exactly, and you're inviting people who are involved in
we consider our program
that
as an educational piece, and we want to learn about things, and that's why we invited you on, because I hear the word NRD, NRD, NRD. I know it has something to do with natural resources, but what is the Lower Platte South Natural Resource District? Tell me what that is.
Well, first I'd like to back into it by talking about NRDs statewide.
Okay.
There are 23 NRDs.
So Lower Platte South is one of 20.
One of 23.
23.
And they were all formed roughly at the same time. And I'd really like to go back into the human side of it because
a little background would be great.
My way of thinking about all of this is good people using good science to make good natural resource decisions.
Good people, good science, good decisions.
And I want to start with the good people.
Okay.
And Senator Maurice Kramer. You know, we hear the term state senator so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and we have no idea, especially the ones that are long past. We have no idea who they were and what they really meant to Nebraska. Well, Senator Kramer was a farmer from somewhere in the central part of the state. I don't recall what his district was, but he was very committed to good governance, good care of his land, good stewardship of his land, and also to good governance. And here's where the good science comes in. He was a friend of Vince Dreesen, a former director of the University of Nebraska's Conservation and Survey Division.
Thank you.
And those scientists and farmers worked together for best management practice for agriculture in Nebraska.
The land grant college.
Exactly, and where the science is supposed to go out to the people and not stay in the ivory tower. And that's what conservation and survey was all about. Well, those two men and others started thinking about the way the state manages its natural resources. And Kramer introduced a bill in 1968 that actually empowered, or it was the enabling legislation for NRDs to be formed. But it took about 3 years to make it happen because there's another trait of Nebraskans. We like to make our own decisions. We don't want government to tell us what to do. But if we didn't have government, it would be chaos. So it took about 3 years for everybody who was part of this process to agree to set up the NRDs. And you stop me if I'm boring you on this.
No, I will.
Okay. You'll stop me when I'm boring you. And my grandfather was one of those. Can I take a few minutes to go into that story? Very short.
While we might re-air this show at a different time, today is Father's Day. I think it's appropriate for a grandfather's story.
I thought about that too.
That's appropriate.
We're doing this on Father's Day.
Yes.
At any rate, good people. My grandfather had a store at 2nd and F Street, and there is a photograph of him with his pant legs rolled up and his suit jacket off. I don't know why he always wore that. His sleeves rolled up and floodwaters from Salt Creek up to his knees. He got together a group of local citizens and they said, we've got to stop the flooding on Salt Creek. And they created the Salt Valley Watershed, which ultimately became a sanitary improvement district. They got federal approval to put the levees along Salt Creek and to dig that channel out. And so basically it was a group of good citizens taking government into their own hands and doing that.
Using what existing science.
Exactly, exactly. So when Senator Kramer put that legislation together to create the NRDs, he had to bring together people like my grandfather and those very local people. He had to bring together irrigation districts in the western part of the state. He had to bring together people on the state level who thought, wait a minute, we want to have full control of the state's water and resources. And instead, the NRDs are locally based resource management and preservation districts. They are organized around watersheds. So Lower Platte South, that I care about so deeply, is just what its name says. We are the southern part of the Platte River.
Okay, thank you. This is helpful.
Yep, and our whole area covers what's known as the watershed of the southern part of the Platte River. So we are all of Lancaster County, all of Cass County, all the way to the Missouri River. We are a little sliver of Seward County, and we are a little bit of Otoe County and a little bit of Saunders County, because that's where the watershed goes.
You said watershed. I'm going to stop you there for a second.
What does that mean?
When I hear watershed, I think this is the lower end, uphill, downhill. The watershed is kind of the downhill portion where all the rainwater falls. It's going to run in that direction.
Perfect. You know, that's a good way, or be collected by the watershed.
Okay.
And a watershed always has some area that is the high point,
Has some
and
elevation
on the other side of
differences.
that, the water flows in other directions. Yeah,
Okay,
great
good.
description.
So you gave us some great history, and it sounds like this steward of the land, this watershed, this natural resource management is in your blood. It's like a family tree.
It is, because my father was also on the Lower Platte South NRD, and it's just the history in our family.
So you're board of directors members for Subdistrict 10.
10.
How many districts in Lancaster County?
How many sub-districts?
How many sub-districts, excuse me?
We have 10. 20 board members, 2 from each sub-district.
2 from each sub-district.
Who are elected every 2 years. We're staggered terms.
Okay.
And then 1 at-large board member.
That was my question. How many and where? So you've served the Lower Platte. Can I just say NRD?
Yes. Say
it's
NRD,
a mouthful.
because it really is.
It's a mouthful.
Really is.
How long have you served on the board?
5 years. The first year I filled a term of someone who had to resign early, and then I ran for election 4 years ago, and am running again this year.
Tell me some more about this board. I hear board members, I think, well, you go to a meeting, you talk, you have coffee and cookies, you listen to you read through a long agenda and you sign off. What are your board meetings like?
This is an extremely skilled and active board, and it operates more on the subcommittee level where the really hard work gets done. And I can talk more specifically about the Water Resources Subcommittee because I've been chair of that subcommittee for 2 years.
Before you do that, so how many subcommittees roughly are there?
4 subcommittees, and then when we have to deal with something specific, we would have an ad hoc subcommittee.
Okay, so you said you were on the Water Resources?
Water Resources, chair of that.
Water's huge for Nebraska. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about this. I hope you don't mind.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Tell me about the Water Resources Committee
and what we do. And to tell you that, I'm going to go back to legislation for just a minute.
Water's been huge. I grew up in another state. I understand there's a negative.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Kentucky, where we have a lot of surface water.
Yes.
We don't have the aquifer
No, you don't.
And we also don't have compacts with Kansas. We don't have obligations to give other people water.
Where to begin?
We don't have to deal with irrigation
Right.
and surface water. So this is all new to me. Would you help me understand?
Okay. The NRDs were organized in '72, but not till 1975 were they given the responsibility to manage groundwater.
Groundwater.
So the State Department of Natural Resources manages surface water, the NRDs manage groundwater.
Okay.
And now I have to talk about the science of groundwater for just a minute. Is that okay?
First, I'm going to say I don't know the difference between surface water and groundwater, so please help me.
Yeah.
And why is it divided between 2 different groups?
Some people would say it's all the same water.
Okay.
But surface
I would
water
think
is,
with
yeah, I would too in a
It's
way
water,
once I
period.
talked to you about it. Surface water is what flows off the land after a rainstorm.
Okay.
Or after the glaciers in the Rocky Mountains melt or the snow in the Rockies melt and comes down as the Platte River.
Yes.
And I was asking you earlier if you knew where the water came from in your faucet
Yes,
if you
well,
turn it on.
and I'm sure it comes from a treatment plant somewhere. But
A
no,
treatment plant gets
from
it.
the aquifer. Yeah, I'll say
Yes,
from the aquifer.
Yes, and that's half true.
Okay.
And the other half is it's surface water that runs off from the top of the Rocky Mountains. There is the North Platte River and the South Platte River that meet at North Platte, Nebraska, and turn into the Platte, which provides our drinking water and our lawn water in Lincoln.
Okay.
And by the way, Lower Platte South NRD does have many other small communities in it. Lincoln is the biggest one, and it's tempting to talk just about
Yes,
Lincoln. But
it's easy to be
many-
Lincoln-centric.
Yes,
and
it is.
We're speaking from a
Yeah.
Lancaster County perspective, so it's a little bit
Exactly.
sometimes challenging to remember.
The whole
And
county.
as you're saying that we get our water from the Platte River, I'm thinking the Platte River doesn't run through Lancaster County, does it?
No, but the city forefathers, they were all men back in the 30s, had the vision to say, let's make sure Lincoln, Nebraska will have plenty of water far into the future. And that's when they got the rights to take water out of the Platte River at Ashland, which is why
Ashland?
Ashland, Nebraska, which is why our water treatment plant is there. And it is then piped from Ashland to various spots in Lincoln and then into our homes. If you ever can take a tour of the Ashland plant, it's remarkable. And
So the water I'm drinking came from Ashland?
yes, it did,
Okay.
but it
that's
came from somewhere else,
from Colorado.
the Ogallala Aquifer.
Okay, you're really,
I'm really confusing
yes.
you now.
Yeah,
Because when the Platte River enters Nebraska, it has a
Yes.
certain flow. But when it gets to Columbus, Nebraska,
I've been there.
the Loop River comes in at Columbus. That is all water from the Ogallala Aquifer coming in the Loop River.
Okay.
And that is the one of the most constantly flowing streams or rivers in the world because the Ogallala Aquifer is full of so much water. If you have canoed or kayaked down any of the
Yes.
loops or the Dismal, you'll see springs coming up all the time, and those are coming out of the Ogallala. Now, I could just keep talking,
Yeah,
and
I'm
this
gonna-
is crazy.
I'm
Yeah,
a little confused, but I've got a general
but
handle
you
on it, but I want to bring it back to Lancaster County
Yes.
just a bit.
Yes,
So water management, you were talked about Colorado, we talked about Loop City and the Dismal
and
River
the
and lots of
Dismal
other.
and the Ogallala, yeah.
As a resident of Lancaster County, those things are far away from me, and I really am not.
But without them, you would not have
Yeah.
water coming out of your faucet. But let's bring it right here because
Yes.
I'm talking about groundwater, which
Yes.
is such a major management responsibility.
You know, a few years ago we had water restrictions.
But-
We couldn't irrigate. We couldn't
Right.
sprinkle our lawns.
And now we've had a lot of rain. I will
Yeah, we've had
come
a-
back to that in a minute because there's another side to water management when we were talking about surface water. The NRDs are also responsible for making sure that we manage flood waters.
Okay.
And therefore, not only do we have those levees along the
Salt,
Salt Creek,
yes.
but we also have various lakes all around
Yes.
the 5 counties that are retention dams that
Yes.
that help in times of high runoff to regulate things. And so we've made a big difference in the economic development of Lincoln and Waverly and even far to the east. I don't know if you know of Lake Wakanda, but we help
Yes.
with the levees there to really help in times of stress because of flooding, to really protect people and property.
When I moved to Lincoln and Lancaster County, I was greatly impressed and a little surprised by all the little recreation areas and all the little
Yes.
lakes and all the little streams. The water retention is more what I'm accustomed to where I grew up. We had
Where you
those-
grew up in the
and those were-
TDA.
and those were
and the
flood
Tennessee-
controls, yes.
Yes, exactly. Now, there's a downside to all these little lakes on the prairie. These prairie lakes fill in with sediment really quickly. And so the NRD is also responsible for sediment control.
Okay.
And we do this, for example, in Lincoln, we do this in conjunction with the city of Lincoln. Actually, a lot of our work is done partnering with the city, with the county, with other communities. We don't do everything alone. We love to partner with other agencies. And
that prompts another question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Earlier we talked about surface water was the state, groundwater
Department of Natural Resources.
Yes.
Yes.
Groundwater was NRD's. So I assume there was a state NRD, I don't want to say conflict, competition for fund. How do you, you talked about doing things like management. These things cost money. Where does the budget come from?
Yes, they do. And why don't I just do one quick thing before we get to the budget part, because that's really important, is something called integrated management plan.
Okay, yes.
And oh my gosh,
you're working with the city, you're working with the state. How do you do that?
I hate using plans because everybody's eyes glaze over, but we brought in lots of local citizens, I was on that committee too, to figure out how to cooperate together to manage groundwater and surface water in terms of water supply. I haven't even gotten to water quality yet, to make sure that water coming out of your faucet is pure enough for you to drink, which we're also responsible for.
Oh, goodness.
I know. So a half hour, you guys, I'm talking too much. But,
no, you're not.
But in terms of the budget, you asked about our board. We try to be incredibly responsible fiscally, and we have a very detailed, careful budgeting process. This past year, our budget was right around $24 million, which may sound high, but given all the demand for our services and what we are supposed to be doing, we have a fabulous staff, and they get so much done on that small amount of money. And I know I don't mean to blink my eyes at $24 million, but
my first thought was, you just mentioned a lot of projects. That $24 million would be one of them, wouldn't it?
Well, 24 million.
How do you prioritize the number of projects you have to do?
We were one of the three main sponsors of the Antelope Valley project, which was very expensive.
Yes.
And some people are still hesitant about that, and some people think it was just one of the greatest infrastructure projects.
After every rainstorm, I go look at the weir.
You do.
And watch how it's holding back so much water.
Yeah.
And no one's home is flooded anymore.
Exactly. You know what a weir is.
Yes.
I used to work for Olson Associates, who designed the weir. So
it's the little zigzag dam-like device that is very pretty. I've got some pictures of it where water's overflowing it.
Yeah,
and it's
like
very
a
lovely.
waterfall.
Yes, it
a
is.
mini Niagara.
Yes.
But
that was a big project.
It was, and it is doing exactly what it's supposed to.
It's my understanding that some of the houses along there were taken out of the floodplain because of that.
Right, and don't have to
buy flood
pay
insurance
the
anymore.
Flood insurance, and the university got more usable land too. But there is one little downside to the weir, and this is our responsibility too. After the heavy flow of water goes away, then you may have noticed there are branches and leaves.
And bicycles and shopping carts and lots of other little things in there, yes.
Yes, so we financially are responsible for cleaning that up.
I wondered who did that. Thank you. Because
it does. The NRD.
Things do come downstream, and they kind of end up behind the weir.
Yeah. To go back to the budget for a minute, probably the biggest piece in the pie chart of our budget is flood control. So we are looking at that throughout the 5 counties that we are responsible for.
Okay.
But also groundwater management is a big part, and other water-related projects. So the biggest part really is water, but I don't want to forget how important some other programs are too.
Yes, please.
I could talk about water for another hour, and I don't think I have that much time.
We do have a little small time limit, but maybe we'll have to just do a program about water.
About water alone.
This is, the water in Nebraska is such a crucial ingredient.
And I just, as a side note, would love if we have time to just mention the field trip.
Please do that now.
Last week to western Nebraska, because the aquifer is totally different in western Nebraska. There's much more water there. The aquifers here in our lower Platte South are what's called old paleo valleys. I went
Okay.
to graduate school in geology.
That sounds something like dinosaurs.
That
That's
sounds
dinosaur
like
speak, yes.
something
I
a
hear
geologist
dinosaur,
would say.
yes.
I know it.
So
I know
let me ask you this question so you can get there, because I want to hear your story.
Yeah.
We're Lower Platte South.
Uh-huh.
There are 22 other districts.
Right.
Are you all in competition or in cooperation to manage the
Well,
water?
it depends what demands are being made on us. And
So what was your
for
true
the
style?
Republican River NRDs, which is where I was visiting last week, they have issues that go all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, and we're still waiting for the final hearing this fall and then a ruling in January. But a lot of those farmers have had to close down their irrigation wells completely. Big areas were taken out of ag production so that that water, and I saw it flowing out into the Republican River, can now go down to Kansas to meet our obligations to Kansas. We don't have that issue here in Lower Platte South, but what we do have is fairly limited aquifers, especially in the northwestern part of our district.
Okay.
So the farmers around Dwight, Valparaiso, and Brainerd are now part of a special management area, and we've had to put a limitation on how much they can irrigate. And that was so hard to do, but domestic wells in groundwater law have a preference over the agricultural irrigation wells.
So I own a home and pump from a well, but I don't raise crops. I have rights to the water first as opposed to the farmer.
A preference opposed
Preference.
to the farmer, yeah. And you two, you and your home and the farmer have a preference over industry and agriculture, which is an acknowledgement that we have limited supplies in Lower Platte South in our aquifers.
I know that the Nebraska legislature, taking a little higher level view, had lots of discussion last session and this year about millions of dollars and having the NRDs. There were loans and transfers and management. And
I'm pretty sure you're referring to the Water Funding Task Force that Senator Carlson enabled and that met the previous year. And now in this legislative session, Carlson and then Lathrop worked together. Initially, there were some conflicts. And they worked together to come up with a bill that has created the Water Sustainability Fund. $50 million is going into that the first year for water projects. And the hope is that the state will be willing to put that into projects down the road. But right now it's just for one fiscal year.
There used to be an old television commercial where a gentleman took his car in for repairs. And the punchline was, pay me now, pay me later.
Oh, I love that.
You can pay me now for maintenance or you can pay me later for repairs. Are we in a situation with that with water?
You know, I was just thinking, Benny, we could say that about some of the issues we care about so much as Democrats, too. But I'm getting off the track of the NRD.
We can invest now or we can pay later.
Yeah, well, or if we had not invested in those Republican River projects, they're called the augmentation projects, almost all the farmers would have had to shut down. So just a percentage of the irrigation wells had to move into another use in order to allow things to happen. And the same is true in the Dwight Val Brainerd area. If we were not managing that now, we could be in big trouble in 5 years.
You were talking about your trip out west, and I don't think you finished. We're running a little close on time. I want to ask you a couple quick questions and let you follow up. And it's been raining like crazy here recently. So we, especially here in Lancaster County, we think, oh, the drought's over. There are no more water problems. I can irrigate my lawn again now.
Well, the Drought Center here at UNL, good scientists, once again, good people, good science.
How can we have a drought when there's water standing everywhere?
Right. And the severe drought is mitigated. We are no longer in a severe drought in their short-term maps as we really had been in 2012. But the aquifers still need to be managed really carefully because there's more and more demand on them. And in our part of the state, once again, the aquifers just are nothing like the Ogallala, which is just full of water. We are managing it so well, it is not going to run out. That's another program.
Thank you.
that's another program. But here in Lower Platte South, the aquifers are much more limited, so we do have to be careful. Do I have a minute to talk about trails?
Let's talk about trails.
Yeah.
I am a bicyclist.
Oh, good.
And when I first moved to Lincoln, I would get up every morning, I would ride to Eagle and ride back. I don't do it as much as I probably should, but the trail system is spectacular. How did you do it, and what's on the horizon?
Do you know Elaine Hammer? Have you met Elaine?
I have.
She had the vision. Actually, my business partner and I, back in the mid-'80s, did something called Star Venture, called Community Strategic Planning. Elaine was a big part of that to get the trail system started and underway. And once that was started, the NRDs, especially Lower Platte South, but also Papio, Missouri, have taken the initiative to keep building the trails. And I did bring the newspaper article with me, but I won't try to dig it out. We have such a great trails map, but we want to connect with Omaha.
I wanted to ask you about Jamaica going south to Kansas. And
Jamaica's going south, but we have not been able to finish about a 6 to 8 mile stretch that would connect us with Omaha.
I read something in the news the other day that the Department of Roads might have a deal.
Department of Roads, we don't have the deal ready yet to look at, but they are willing to work with us to figure something out, is the best way to put it. And then we'll all take a big parade up to the Platte River Bridge.
We'll spend the night and bike back.
We will.
I'm sorry, we are almost out of time.
We are out of time.
I want to ask you, you've been serving for
5 years.
5 years,
and I'm running for another 4-year term.
So you're going to continue to help us with this.
And if people want to know more about me and what my campaign is about and where they fit in, KarenAmon.com takes you to my website. KarenAmon.com.
I wish we had more time. I've got a lot more questions I wanted to get to you. Would you consider coming back on the program again and we'll talk some more? This water thing is still very confusing to me. I turn on the tap and it's always fresh, clean water. I don't really worry about it a lot, but you've got me concerned now.
Yeah.
How do we as citizens get more involved and help?
And the part that we didn't talk about was water quality. How do we as citizens make sure that there aren't pollutants in there, that there's not atrazine, nitrates, all these things that harm human bodies? That's a whole nother realm of what the NRD does, and we are very active in that realm.
Well, you have to come back and we'll talk about that and talk about how we can get involved.
Great.
Do the website how often does the board meet, and the website for the board?
LPSNRD.org.
Every citizen can get some more information there.
LPSNRD.org will tell you all about what the Lower Platte South does. Our programs, our board, when we meet, how you can get involved, and our meetings are all open to the public, so we invite you to come and join.
Karen, thanks for joining us today.
Be watchful citizens.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for today on this edition of The Watchful Citizen. I'd like to again thank Karen Amon from the Lower Platte South Natural Resource District, Sub-District 10.
Yes.
Sub-District 10 for joining us today. That is a mouthful.
It is.
I learned a lot about water, and she's going to come back and we're going to talk about it some more soon. Our program airs on Time Warner Cable on Tuesdays at 10:30 p.m. and on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. and on Saturdays at 12:30. You can also catch us on our YouTube channel, Lancaster County Dems. We thank you for watching, and we hope you'll tune in again for another edition of The Watchful Citizen.